Hello, hello.
Hello.
All right. So we are here. We are back. We have our holiday read.
Yep.
Definitely not that. But yeah, we're here to discuss our next book for the high school required reading challenge. And like we've been doing, Alex and I are going to just discuss the book and specifically the place that we feel like it has in the high school reading list. These are books that we have read before, at least one of us has read in high school, and we decided to just start rereading them and see what our thoughts were on those. So we will do a little bit of book review and discussion about the book, as well as a discussion about like where we feel like this does or does not fit in the high school canon. And this is just our opinion. We have decided to start doing these live so you guys in the chat can share your opinions. And we're going to be doing this podcast style. So other than showing the cover of the book that we're going to be talking about, there's really not going to be visually a lot to see. So you can feel free to put it on in the background. So yeah, so before we get started, say hello to a couple of people who are already joining us. Hello, Diana. And she says she hopes everyone is enjoying the holidays. I hope the same for you.
Yeah, we're snowed in today too, so it's just extends the whole Christmas vibe.
I know, I'm so jealous. Yeah, I guess I didn't mention that, like, not only do we not have snow, we're in like a midwinter heat wave. It's in like the 50s and 60s right now.
Yeah, that's insane. That's not Christmas vibes.
Yeah, I was like, how did we get our snow a few weeks ago? And now it's like spring. And good afternoon to Viviana. And hello to Sue. You're going to skip this because it's on your 2026 TBR. Ooh, fun. Well, thanks for stopping in, Sue, and you can always watch it back later. That's the fun part.
Yep.
So, and to talk about what you can watch back later, let's mention what the book is. So we are reading The Great Gatsby.
Yep. I've got this Penguin edition. I ordered this off Thrift Books because I have never seen this cover before.
I haven't either.
Unfortunately, it had quite a bit of highlighting and some pencil notes in it. Thrift Books, I feel like the quality for like good to very good has gotten questionable.
Yeah, no, I've even gotten, I think the one experience I had with thrift books, I did very good to like excellent or like do or whatever the next higher one is. And they were okay.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yeah, I used to shop thrift books all the time. I mean, yeah, it doesn't bother me as much. The writing, like written notes, I was erasing them as I go. So at least they were in pencil, but I did have to buy a new copy. Well, still used, but like a clean copy for my kids because my poor kids have to, spoiler alert, have to read this also.
Dun, dun, dun. But it is still a cool cover. And hello, Jenny. And hello, Doug.
Hello.
And Natalie. And you didn't read it because you remember not liking it at all, but you still want to hear everybody else's thoughts. Totally fair. And hello, Patricia. Happy holidays to you as well. All right, so we are discussing The Great Gatsby because, yeah, we showed you the cover and didn't say it out loud. So if you weren't watching, you didn't see that. It's by F. Scott Fitzgerald and was published in the 1920s, right? 1925 is what I have.
Mid-20s, which makes it interesting to read knowing, timeline of American history, like what this is kind of leading up to. Because there was a point where I was like, oof, like this is not going to go well for them. And then I'm like, oh, Fitzgerald didn't know either. What the 30s had in store. 29, right? 29 was a collapse, and then the 30s is the Great Depression.
Yep. And then you've got two major wars coming.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were a couple of things that were said in the book that caught us, and we were like, wait, what? Oh no, you don't know. Okay.
Yeah, had to like recheck when this was published. That just adds another really interesting element to it.
Yeah.
Reading
like
it.
I remember. Yeah, like I remember one specific line at the end of the chapter says something about like doing away with people or going off, or it was going to end something something like like a Holocaust. And the sentence, like my first thought was, oh my gosh, it's horrible use. Why would
Right.
you say that? And that's so like at best tacky. And then I had to
Mhm.
think about when this was written, I was like, that has that was just the word choice and has
I
nothing to
had the
do with.
same experience. I was like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, insensitive," and then I was like, "Oh, that was just a word." Like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So definitely interesting things about the timepiece. Okay, so for those who may not have read The Great Gatsby or haven't read it in a gajillion years, like
Mm.
I feel like I hadn't, what would you say The Great Gatsby is about? Like, how would you summarize it? And what do you feel like theme, author's intent, any of that good stuff?
I think basic plot summary is we have a narrator who has moved from the Midwest to New York. He's living on Long Island, and he finds himself renting a home next to a mansion, um, the mansion of Jay Gatsby. And so it's a novel just of excess. We have these huge parties. It's just like a very like wealthy New York, but there's a sense of longing and kind of sadness throughout the novel. So, like, plot wise, it's basically just watching Jay Gatsby throwing parties, trying to get closer and closer to his love interest. Um, Theme wise, I think I differ from the generally accepted theme that this is a novel about the American dream. Um, I would say this is more a novel about yearning, less about the American dream, more about like living in the past and trying to recapture glory or a
Mhm.
feeling. Um,
I could even buy trying to recapture a feel of the original American dream, which was to
yeah,
just own a piece of property and to sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do better. Like that kind of essence of the American dream versus the American dream as it is in the 1920s. So, but I think that still goes with the recapturing the past
yeah,
idea. Mhm.
yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know. What would you say to describe this book to someone like to someone who had? It's hard to like be vague about it because you just assume everyone knows this book at this point.
Yeah, I think I would describe it as, like you said, it's a book that is told by Nick Carraway, who is a young, well, is he young? I guess he's almost in his 30s,
Yeah.
right? Um, so it depends on what young is to you. But he is from the Midwest. He has, for a variety of vague reasons, moved
Mm.
out to the East Coast and finds himself living in basically like millionaire Long Island kind of situation, next door to Jay Gatsby, like you said. And he is just become really sort of involved in checking out. He's kind of like the next door neighbor voyeur of, of
That's
Jay
a,
Gatsby's
yeah,
life.
that's accurate.
Yeah. And even though Nick is kind of from like a middle class, upper middle class, he's kind of getting a moment of checking out the lifestyle of the rich and the famous. It's almost like the 1920s version of reality TV.
hmm Well, yeah, it's to me, and I said this as so we read this in time with each other and we check in on Boxer and like so this is our big culmination like discussion that we share with everyone. But so as we were reading, I was like, I feel like I'm reading a nature documentary with the style of like the narrator just kind of watching everything happen, but never taking a part
Yeah.
in the story.
Yeah. 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 No, we talked about that and I just absolutely loved that description because we were like there's something really detached about how Nick narrates this story. And then as soon as he said nature documentary, I was like, that's exactly it. It's like he's sitting there with his telescope lens watching this all happen to other people because he refuses
Yeah.
to become part of
Never
any of the
intervene.
drama. Yeah, it's like Jay crosses the lawn and he stares across at the green light, wondering what will happen next. His prey comes up,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like,
That's not exactly how it's told, but
to the
that's how
point
it
where, like, this
feels.
character does something awful, like, will cause harm to someone else, and he just watches because, you
He's
can't
not judging them.
judge them, can't intervene, can't put your own, like, influence into the moment.
Yep. Yep. So, all right. Well, let's get into it. I did look up a little bit about the author's intent, and apparently Fitzgerald wrote this book with an intention of highlighting the hedonism that was going on in the 1920s, and to some extent, showing how the American dream had changed from what it was as people immigrated to the US to what it had become in the 1920s, which was to just get rich for the sake of being rich and to just enjoy life for the sake of enjoyment. And basically to be a hedonist is what he felt like. And so that's what he intended to show in the writing of this book. We have a couple of quick comments that have come in. Teresa was saying that she didn't like it when she read it in high school, but reread it later and now likes it.
That's a good point. And I feel like that's why we kind of went into this project, is to see, like, we're in a different place now. How do we respond to books?
Yep, absolutely. Though Teresa does think it might be too mature for younger readers. So I would definitely like to hear more about that. Diana felt it had some hints of Wuthering Heights, with Daisy Kathy being loved by the person they don't choose, and neither book ends well. Interesting. And a happy reading for Viviana. And before we go any further, I do want to say we are doing this discussion assuming that people have read the book, insofar as we will be doing spoilers. We don't tend to talk too much about the plot, but things may come up here and there during the discussion. So this is your one and only warning.
Yeah.
So histories and expectations surrounding the book. What was your high school experience in reading
this was assigned my sophomore year in high school. And I think as a summer reading assignment. So we were supposed to start the school year having read the book. And I put it off to the point where, like, I ended up just doing, like, Cliff Notes chapter summaries and, like, chapter analysis and, like, reading those to catch up because school was starting. I was pretty bad at reading my assignments in school. And I think it just, we've had this conversation before of, like, as a teenager, if you're telling me I need to read this, I don't want to read it then. So I did not love what I had read of it then. And then I tried rereading it maybe about 10 years ago. No. Yeah, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, and still didn't like it. But for whatever reason, I had in my mind, like, I need to read this book one more time because it is so generally loved, or is what I thought, that, most people really, really like this book. So I feel like I needed to give it a fair shot, and to see if there was this underlying message or, like, criticism, because all I could remember of it was, this is just about rich people partying and a rich guy, loving a married woman. So I was looking forward to revisiting it with you as a more mature, experienced reader and being able to dissect it and seeing, like, okay, what layers actually are there? Is there something deeper? Is there actual messaging? And the author's intent, does that succeed?
Yeah. So I love that, like, you were cliff noting your way through this. I actually kind of, like, have a much deeper appreciation for cliff notes now than I did in high school. Like, in high school, they just talked about things that I didn't want to think about or didn't want to talk about when I was reading books in high school. And now they like pique my curiosity, like in terms of like, what do other people think about this book? But anyway, my high school reading experience, I know this was assigned at some point in high school. I'm also assuming like freshman or sophomore year, but we were assigned it in class. Um, and the only thing I really remember about reading it is that I'm pretty sure this is the same cover I had then. And I found it incredibly boring. I just, and in fact, so much so that I'm surprised it's this short because I just remember feeling like it just went on forever. And I don't recall liking a single moment of this book or finding anything interesting about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty much all that I remember or recall of it. I don't even know that I recall any major plot points in the book. And in fact, as we went through and reread it, I was like, yeah, I don't remember this or that or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So Doug was saying that he thinks Teresa is right about it being hard to properly appreciate the book as a teenager, and we will be talking about that. And Diana was asking how much input did Zelda have in F. Scott's writing? And you had talked about this.
That's a question I have too. I think there's a lot of speculation that he plagiarized parts from her, or he had access to her journals. But yeah, that's something I am interested in looking up more about their relationship dynamic.
Yeah, because I know that there's been a lot more that's come out about his wife, like in recent years. And I think there's even a fiction book that's about his wife, right?
I think so, yeah.
I think it's like Z or something like that. Because I feel like it comes up every time I'm looking for a Z book for my. But Diana was saying that her grandson read this as a senior and you discussed it while he was reading it. How was that discussion? And did he like it? That's what I want to know. And Doug agrees that yes, Heathcliff and his limerence absolutely show up in Gatsby.
All right. Wuthering Heights has to be on my 2026 TBR. It's come up multiple times in our book chats.
Yeah, it was not high school required reading for me, but it was definitely a book that a lot of people were reading in high school. So, okay, well, let's get into the nitty gritty. How did we like this? Our favorite parts, our least favorite parts, you guys in the comments, if you recall your thoughts on it, whether you liked it or didn't like it, what was it about the book that you liked? Let's start there. What was your favorite part of the book?
It's really hard for me to pick a favorite part of the book. I will say I did enjoy it more than I ever have. So that's progress. That's a positive, I guess. I definitely did see where being an older, more experienced reader makes the book a little bit more enjoyable. Or I could see things that I had missed previously. But my favorite part, I think, is gonna be a little dark. I liked how miserable all the characters were. I had a real morbid satisfaction in seeing all these wealthy people had their issues. This party lifestyle, this Daisy in particular has this really flighty, carefree, just here for fun times kind of characterization, but that's all hiding something deeper. And so I think I liked that each character had layers. I can't totally say that the characterization was completely rounded. I feel like Fitzgerald didn't quite nail it down, especially with Daisy. And so that's where the conversation of what influence did his wife have? Because I want to like Daisy's character, but there's something that maybe F. Scott Fitzgerald as a man couldn't quite capture. Something about her.
Yeah, I remember when we were talking about it that we were discussing her character at one point, and you were expressing, I think it was frustration that she was being characterized as flighty. And it was something like you felt like that him characterizing her as flighty was because there was like a struggle to characterize like her masking as
Right.
anything else than flightiness. And showed sort of almost a lack of understanding of women or characterization or something like that, that the only way you could understand a woman trying to hide how she feels about a disagreeable situation is by her being flighty. Though it could also be
Yeah.
argued that that was how women during that time period masked, because that was how they were expected to act.
Maybe, because that reminds me, I did compare her to Holly Golightly, Breakfast at Tiffany's. And that's another book and character that, like, I understand why she acts the way she does, but I still didn't like the character. Like, there was some way that she was written where, like, I didn't care enough about her, even though, like, I know she's like troubled, she's depressed. She's not satisfied with her life, or she's doesn't have a sense of agency, and that's why she is the way she is. And so normally I would like exploring a character like that, but for whatever reason there was just something lacking. And this is my favorite part of the story, is what we're talking about here.
In case we forgot.
Oops.
Yeah, no, but it is interesting because I think Daisy is a character that you're supposed to like in some ways, but you really don't. Or at least it's more difficult, it seems like, than there should be. And I was talking to another friend about this, and she said that most people she knows does not like Daisy, do not like Daisy.
Yeah.
And so again, if she's supposed to be a character that everything about her circumstance should have you sympathizing with her, it makes you question it.
I
From
actually
us,
think she's written a little bit as an unlikable character by, like, I don't know that you're supposed to like her, but like this is where I'm picking up that like there's something broken about her that like I want to, if not like, care about.
yeah, yeah. I think care about her is more
Mhm.
accurate, and to at least be able to sympathize with some aspect of her. And I think also what you were talking about with how, you know, I mean, you didn't say this phrase, but I mean, he's really not glamorizing the lifestyle of the rich and famous, if you will, here.
Mhm.
It really is kind of looking at what it's really like for them on a day to day basis. And my son,
Yeah.
who read this book in high school, he phrased it as the lifestyle of the rich and boring.
Mm.
Um, he very much felt like, yeah, in terms of the author's intent, like he didn't necessarily feel like it was showing the hedonism of the time period, or that's not what stuck with him. But he was like, he definitely did a good job of not making you feel like, oh, I'd love to be rich, because he's like, it seems miserable.
Right.
And so I think that was successful. Um, for me, I think I also struggled to say that I had a favorite part of the book. I don't know that I did, but my favorite part of reading this book was talking about it and discussing it, because it is such a well-known book. There is a lot about the book and just the lore around the book to talk about. Um, and so I enjoyed that. And like you, I liked it better on this reread than I did in high school. I
Mhm.
still thought it was boring for quite a bit of it. Um, but I came up with like a couple of conspiracy theories that really carried me through the book. Um, so very early on in the book, there is, I think at the end of maybe like chapter 2, um, a really strange passing moment where there's like a couple of cut scenes where like they're walking out of an apartment, suddenly they're in an elevator, suddenly they're in a bedroom. And it just reminds me of how you cut scenes in movies and imply things. And I suddenly was like, oh my gosh, did Nick Carraway, our narrator, just have sexual intercourse with a man? because he's not supposed to be homosexual. And nothing in this book is supposed to be, in theory, in this class. And I was like, oh, Fitzgerald, did you just sneak that in there?
Yeah, the way it's written is like just very cut, and like you're breaking from an elevator to a bedroom, but like you're leaving a party, everyone's drunk, and then he's in the street like afterwards and he's not sure where. So like I had to reread it. I go, he's not telling me something.
Right. Because you're like, wait, you're already aware that it's a first person narrator, that he seems to be unreliable, that he's definitely editing out what he's saying. And you go into the elevator with this ellipse, and he's in there with this guy. There's this weird quote of, take your hand off the lever, which I was like, is that an innuendo? Like, what is happening here? So that was an interesting moment. So then I was like, is Nick Carraway and all this vagueness of why he's moved out east and all this about him being a bachelor and this and that because he's a closeted homosexual? So that was out there. I mentioned this to my son to see if they've talked about it in his class, and he's like, oh yeah, that's like common knowledge now. And I was like, okay, well.
Yeah. Well, so again, I don't know much about Zelda and F. Scott and their relationship, but I did, since finishing, read that she accused him of having relationships with Ernest Hemingway. And like that writer circle that they were in, she very much accused him of being with other men. And then he had her locked up for schizophrenia. So
odd. Strange.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, maybe question, self-insertion, like hinting but not saying.
Yeah, interesting. And talking about Zelda and the writing circle, Doug came in and was saying that William Faulkner apparently riffed on the book in Mosquitoes. And Z, that was the novel about Zelda. And it is by Fowler, published in 2013. I know it was pretty like popular when it came out. Diana, it should be a novel of Zelda, and you read it and thought it could work. Good to know. Teresa hated Daisy, see?
And I think that's the popular takeaway is, we don't like her.
But Teresa felt like she had to also remember the time that she lived in. Yeah. And Doug was saying that it's hard to be super sympathetic with the character who inspired the most famous line about Tom and Daisy were careless people.
And so by the time we get back around to that line pissed me off. Why? Because I felt like it was unfair to Daisy. It put a lot of blame on her, where really she's a woman who didn't have a lot of agency.
I think it ignored all the issues that were going on with Daisy and all like the things that you would have sympathized with her about, and then just clumped her together with one of the worst characters in the book and made them one and the same with no distinction. And I remember finding that really unfair as well. So other things, I also enjoyed talking about passing. I had all sorts of theories that I was going with. So apparently there are some people who have speculated whether Jay Gatsby himself was an African-American man passing as white, and if that was some of the tension surrounding him. I didn't feel like there was a lot of textual evidence to support that, and a lot of people have also said that. I did, however, wonder if Jordan, who is the golf player that Nick kind of gets involved in, if she was passing in the book. And I feel like there is a lot of textual evidence to potentially support that, namely the fact that every time she comes on the scene, there's a reference to how dark her skin is. And it's clear that the idea is that her skin is constantly looking tanned, because she plays golf outside. She's obviously supposed to be breaking the mold for women, because she's a professional golfer. And I'm like, but why not also have her breaking the race barrier? There are quite a few African Americans mentioned in passing throughout the book. Like, not mentioned that they're passing, but like they make little cameos throughout the book. And it just seems like it would be an additional layer because you have so many people and moments in the book where people are masking and, trying to move into a sphere where they don't belong. And it made me wonder if Jordan was supposed to be one of those characters who, unlike Jay, successfully is able to pass into this next class level. And there are other people who have also questioned that. It could also just be something that Fitzgerald put in there that had different meanings in the 1920s than it does today. We will never know, but it did make me wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see here. We had a couple other comments come in. Hello to Lauren. Thanks for joining us. Doug was saying, good point to Alex about knocking Daisy in the best line in English lit. I don't know if I would say that's the best line in English literature either. Like, no, certainly not English lit, and I don't know about American lit.
Yeah, and I honestly, I feel like there are books, lines from even without reading it, and that one doesn't really stand out to me as being a big influential line. I don't know. It could be because I have very little interest in The Great Gatsby, where it's never something that's stuck.
I mean, the quote on the back of my book is from the very end. It's the last line in the book. So we beat on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. That's also a quote that I'm like, I guess so.
Yeah, same thing. Finishing the book on that quote also kind of annoyed me. We can get to that later. But on the subject of Jordan and her potentially being a character passing, I really liked that read of her. And while it makes sense, I almost don't think that Fitzgerald would have done it intentionally. I could see this more being this character is taken from someone in his life, someone he knows, and he's writing, faithfully to that person, and maybe he's not even aware. So if it was, I feel like it would be accidental inclusion. I just
I'd like to say I disagree, but I don't. I also, when I first thought of that idea that wait, maybe this character is passing, I also thought, does Fitzgerald know that?
Yeah.
Did he accidentally write a character that's passing in his book based off someone he knew?
Some other things I read were if someone's passing, it might not be racial passing. It might be that she is pretending to be straight. And that all this reference to her skin color does just mean she's just very tan because she's always outside and she's being athletic. Tom at one point says something about I can't believe your guardian lets you run around the way you do. She's a woman, she should be at home,
Right. Yeah, and it's definitely much more accepted through time that all that's going on with Jordan is that she's breaking the gender barrier in multiple ways. But again, it made the book more enjoyable to me to think that she was adding the race barrier to it, and that everything was built up in Jordan and she did it to perfection, apparently, with or without Fitzgerald knowing it.
And when you brought that up, I was like, oh, I like that, especially because my take is that The Great Gatsby should be replaced on high school reading lists with Nella Larsen's passing. So when you said that, and I was like, okay, I like that theory, but I still like passing the novel better.
Yeah. I mean, I've yet to find a person who read this book in high school who liked it in high school. Maybe liked it better, but not in high school. And we'll get to that, but it definitely becomes a a question of relevance to high schoolers. But before we get to its high school appropriateness, let's talk about our least favorite thing in the book.
Which is funny because it sounds like we were already there.
I liked my passing theory.
No, yeah, that was
whether it was in the book or not.
Yeah. My least favorite thing has to come down to the style it's written in. I feel like the language was a little bit too convoluted. It just felt very overwritten, and especially starting the novel. Like the first page took me way too long to read because I had to keep going back and going, what are we talking about? What is he describing? And like, what is the opinion of this thing he's saying? Because, I mean, especially because it opens with Nick telling us that he's not a judgmental person and he's very truthful, but everything you're reading is like, you're lying. You're one of the most critical people. You just don't say anything.
Yeah.
But even just that, the descriptions used, like the style it's written in is very much like you have to like go back and like very carefully kind of dissect like, okay, what are you saying here?
Mm-hmm.
It gets, I don't know if it's a matter of like it getting better as the book goes, or we're just getting used to it as the book goes.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I mean, and it's funny to say that, especially given that our last book was Great Expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And like Charles Dickens' writing style is not known to be like easy to decode right off the bat. You know, it can take a little bit to get used to him. But I feel like once you get used to him, most people end up enjoying his writing. Whereas I think the difference with this, even if it's just, okay, it takes a moment to get used to it, even once you get used to it, like, yeah, I too still didn't find it like enjoyable or certainly not beautiful. It's not how I would personally describe his writing. I thought it was, you know, like you said, as it went on, I got used to it and I thought it was fine. But yeah, anything else that you...
Well, then I guess going back to the intent of the author to kind of show and highlight the hedonism, I don't think he did a good enough job including a contrast, to include like another side where we can come to a conclusion that he's saying this is bad. Like he didn't show us anything else. Like you said, like there were like servants or like, you know, drivers, you know, minorities, like in passing, like very briefly, just like, you know, Nick would walk by a table and mention there was a table in the room. Like that's how other people were included, like just very much tossaways. And so there was never a moment where you can say like, oh, he's comparing excess to want or need.
So it was kind of like the lack of a foil.
Right. And so when we read Ragtime, what, 4 books ago, that was earlier in our project. Reading Ragtime, I was like, this is what Gatsby's missing for me, because Ragtime shows you a wealthy family. It shows you an immigrant family. It shows you an actress. It shows you a jazz musician from, you know, the other side of the city. And like, it shows you all the different walks of life living in the same time and place. And that's what I appreciated of that. And that's what's lacking in The Great Gatsby for me. And why I think he kind of fails in that, you know, I want to show you, you know, how miserable these people, like he showed us how miserable they are, but there was no contrast to like say anything about the class. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of like, you know, Downton Abbey, that works because you see the upstairs and the downstairs, or like in Ragtime, or even like in Great Expectations, right? Mm-hmm. You see Pip's home life and how it could be versus what Miss Havisham's could be. So,
and I think that's also why a lot of people glamorize The Great Gatsby and they throw these Gatsby-themed Roaring 20s parties, is because Fitzgerald didn't do a good enough job of, you know, leading the reader into a direction of like, here's what I'm actually saying about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Yeah. Yeah. Because you don't have Nick criticizing any of it. He, he's
Or if they do, it's
non-judgmental.
so subtle.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So if you have somebody who's just doing a surface read of this or just taking away what they remember from the book, like they're remembering the party scenes. They're not remembering the outcome of the party scenes. They're not remembering like where things went from there. So I know somebody even famously talked about how, yeah, have you read the book? People can die from a party. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it's not just good, harmless fun.
right. Like that's the message of the book is that it's not good, harmless fun. And that is the note that it ends on. But then there's the issue of what's the lasting impact. And it sounds like, yeah. I think for me, my least favorite part is just all surrounding the plotting of the book. I think the events, especially towards the later half, like there are some interesting events that eventually happen. But that gets into the pacing for me, which I think the pacing to get to those events was kind of long and drawn out. And for a short book, I kind of wish it was shorter, even though some of those intervening chapters do build up to the characters. But I don't know. Some of the events, I don't know. The plot overall it just didn't work that well for me. And the rest of it wasn't good enough for the book to hang solely on those. So I think that was for me one of my least favorite things because I think a slightly tighter plot could have made all of it come together better for me.
Yeah. I, coming off of Great Expectations, pointed out that this book does a similar thing where a lot of the plot relies on coincidence. And where that got annoying to me in Great Expectations, I feel like this one was even worse in terms of like, oh, you just so happened to move next to this guy who happens. Well, in Gatsby's case, he purposefully bought a house across the water from Daisy. But Nick just happens to have, had someone rent a house who then backs out. But he's at this house that happens to be next to Jay, who happens to be in love with his cousin. And like there was just a lot of coincidence that the plotting really relied on.
Yeah. And that doesn't tend to bother me as much. But yeah, there are definitely some of it conveniently set up for the sake of our story. Yeah, absolutely. To go back to the comments real quick before we move on to high school appropriateness, Doug was saying that Alex is right and thinks that Nella Larson would be a way better choice. And we will share at the end some of the other choices that we have or further reading. Diana was saying Alex made you think of how it would sound written by P.G. Wodehouse. I have read nothing by P.G. Wodehouse, so I can't share in that.
That's the Butler Jeeves series. Is that okay? I haven't read them.
Yeah. Doug was saying he'd argue for keeping this text in school nowadays with Gatsby themed ball at the White House and the S&P 500 through the roof. It's very relevant for today. So that's how he would connect it for high schoolers today. And he says, wasn't Nick the foil? Kind of a firsthand witness to the excess of Gatsby, plus Nick was a witness to Gatsby's demise. I think that was definitely the intent, Doug. I think Nick was supposed to be the foil, but I would agree with Alex that he was kind of a weak foil.
Yeah. And even if he doesn't have the money that Gatsby has, he had the class that Gatsby didn't. And so he's not a complete opposite because he almost belonged in that world more than Gatsby did.
Yeah, he fit in. Yeah, because there's definitely moments where Gatsby is doing a whole bunch of faux pas and he's on the outside of it and Nick is still on the inside. Right. And the fact that Nick doesn't have the money doesn't seem to be holding him back from any of the things that these people in this class should otherwise have. Because he he has apparently the thing that's the most important, which is basically the breeding. But getting into that idea of high school appropriateness, we always ask, why do we think this book is being taught in high school? And do we think that high school is the appropriate setting for it? Not in terms of like content warnings, but just, is that the right age, place, setting to introduce this work?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts? Why taught is it appropriate?
I think the reason it gets taught in high school, and specifically around the like freshman, sophomore year of high school, is because that lines up with what you're learning in history at those times. And you're hitting the roaring 20s on like a American history timeline. And so why not read a book written about, you know, those roaring parties, you know, written during the same time about that lifestyle. But I don't think it's written in a way that's engaging for teen readers. We talked about how I did not like the style. And then my big gripe is that I feel like we're missing the point, and it's not doing enough to like teach a lesson, because all that sticks is this like gold shiny party scene, and going back to like, oh, well, now it's appropriate because we've had the White House throwing parties. That only emphasizes this idea that like no one's reading it right anyway.
Right. So, and teaching it in high school, if you walk away from it, you know, 10 years down the road, is I remember the party because everything else about it was boring.
Yeah. Like I don't see I don't see like a 14-year-old, 14, 15 being able to really appreciate the theme. So like I didn't like it until just now, like is where I was able to be like, oh, okay, there is something else there. And, you know, it took me to age 39, I think. Yeah, I'm 39 now, that I could like read deeper into the book. So at like 14, 15, it wasn't there.
Yeah, I think if this was having a greater impact, you would be seeing 16, 17-year-olds having, you know, hopefully not Gatsby themed, you know, graduation parties, but you would see some element of it coming up at a younger age, as opposed to a decades later reflection back moment on it. And so, yeah, so I think it is a question of, even if the book itself is popping back up, is it worth revisiting just simply because of that, in the scope of everything? Teresa was saying that she thinks if she had a better teacher in high school who had more excitement over the required books, that maybe she would have enjoyed it more. And that can definitely have an impact on things. I know that wasn't my son's experience or my experience. I enjoyed other books I read with the teacher who taught this, just not this particular book. And the same is true for my son in high school. He enjoyed other things they read. This was not one of them. And in fact, this is probably on the very like bottom of the list for him. And he's currently 19. So, I mean, again, talking about, you know, if this is going to have relevance, like he understood the book, he understood the purpose of the book. He's not thinking it's glamorizing anything. And still 5 years later, he's like, you know, and he's a huge reader. So, so it's interesting. And I guess for me, like you said, like, I think the main reason it's read is because of the time period. Not to keep bringing up my son, but that's the most recent high schooler that I know of. He said the same thing that you did, Alex. It was because they were studying the Jazz Age. That was the main reason for reading this. They needed a fiction book. It lined up with their curriculum in history. They were talking about the Jazz Age in general during that time period. And so they read a couple of works from that time period. He said this was the novel that they read. And then some of the other works that they read at the time were poetry and stuff from the Harlem Renaissance. So that was kind of how it was broken up for them. But he just felt like this was just a very small view of one portion of society during this time period that he didn't find a lot of relevance for in his current life.
Yeah. And I feel like if you ask anyone to like describe the 1920s, people like default to Roaring Twenties. And again, like that just proves that like the impact having everyone read this book is that we only have this narrow scope of what the entire decade looked like. Like it really did not look like that, like in the Midwest or, you know, like across different racial groups. Like this is a New York, East Coast, wealthy lifestyle. Like this is what the 20s look like for them. But it gets taught as representing the 1920s for America.
Right. Which is interesting because it's not even represented that way in the book. Like in the book, like he's pretty forward about the fact that this is like just a very niche circle, even within New York City itself.
Yeah.
And mainly focused on Long Island. And so, you know, it's interesting
that the biggest issue is, I guess, the almost like the impact of the book more than the book itself, or yeah, the like legacy of the book even. At some point I was like, you know what, I don't know that this book was meant to have this long standing readership. Like I feel like it would have been a good contemporary novel, like written at the time, read at the time, maybe would have been more relatable. I think people would have read the sarcasm or criticism more obviously being there in that moment. Yeah. And so I wonder if, well, I know that there would be better books that stand the test of time a little more.
Yeah, I think in a time and age where like readership is down, where getting students invested in reading anything longer than an article, I don't think it's a matter of throwing out all classics. I think it's a matter of choosing your classics wisely and not necessarily going with the tried and true, well-worn one because we've always done that. Mm-hmm. I think this would be a book that would fit into high school well, again, as we've been saying for a lot of them, as an option. Like if somebody was doing a research project for history or for English and they had to choose a time period to study, and somebody wanted to do specifically the Roaring 20s, yeah, this makes sense if they wanted to do the research based on a novel versus nonfiction. Or if they wanted to study the 20s in general, you know, this is a particular time period, and this would be an interesting book to look at for that. But to have this book represent all of the 1920s to students, I feel like is missing the point. So before we go into further reading and other options, we've got to rate the book. So to give our 2 cents, you guys can put in the comments as well. If you gave it a letter grade A to F, what grade you would give it, or a star rating, however you want to do it. We do both. Mm-hmm. So do you have yours written down?
I have mine. Yep.
I do too. All right. Let's share. Oh, the same grade.
You're spot on. I feel like we're getting closer and closer to each other as we go.
Yes. And, you know, it's in a downhill trajectory. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I feel like a C sounds really low, but on a star rating, it's a 3.5.
Yep. 3.5 stars, which almost feels a little high for me. Yeah.
I went back and forth. Like, yeah. I found the book kind of boring, but it's not an awful book. And I think it is a potentially, well, I'm not even going to say potentially. I think it is a possibly good book for a book discussion because it's so well known, because of there's a lot to talk about both in the past and currently in the present. But as a book in and of itself, like just reading and entertainment and like your own personal experience of the book, struggle bus.
I feel like it's not like a casual read, like a just sit down and flip pages. Like, I feel like you really need to do some dissection and thinking and pausing and like, what are you saying here? What is the ulterior motive here? Like, what am I not getting from this character? Like, so I feel like there's almost like a lot of work to do in reading this little novel.
Mm-hmm. Which sounds like it would make it really good for a class, and I think that's why for me it did get a 3.5 instead of something lower. But just when I weigh my own personal enjoyment in there as a read itself, like I can't give it a 4.
I think I see potential in it, and the fact that it doesn't reach that is what knocks it down, and I can't give it a 4.
Yeah. Let's see. And Teresa gave it a C as well.
Yep.
Okay. And Diana really enjoyed the book and would give it an A or 5 stars. Nice. And see, I think for Diana, I think it sounds like for you, it reached that potential. And I do think it has a lot of potential. It's just for me, if I was going to go like good for a book group or a book club, I think I'd give it like a 4 or 5. Like I'd recommend this for a book club. I'd feel a little sorry for the book club while they were reading it. Wouldn't be shocked if a lot of people came not having finished the book. But if you got everybody to read it, I think you'd have a really good conversation during book club. Just not leading up to it.
I think there is a moment that I was really enjoying, and it's where like everything comes to a head and you can see how things are playing out. And I did remember like what the big event, the big tragedy of the book is. So like as I'm rereading this and I could see it unfolding, I'm like, okay, this is kind of exciting, or like I like how all the pieces are lining up. And so like at that moment, I'm like, okay, this is a good story. But then when I take it as a whole is where, okay, 3.5.
Yeah. It ends better than it begins, for sure, especially in terms of the plot. So if we're going to give this a C, what about further reading, other reading, read-alikes, recommended choices, replacements, however you want to put it?
Well, mine already came up. When I read Passing by Nella Larson, that's a novel of the Harlem Renaissance. Very similar thing where you have like a lot of partying going on. And then again, there's like a big moment towards the end where you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And so I remember like almost like beat for beat and like the pace of it reminded me of The Great Gatsby. I just found it a lot more interesting and better written. So Passing by Nella Larson is my read-alike and recommendation. And then, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that makes a lot of sense, because I mean, if you're going to stick with a niche group, you might as well go with a more interesting story.
And then I just started this book last night, not even thinking it would be related to Gatsby, but that's Stoner by John Williams. And I'm loving, and like I'm 16 pages in, loving the writing style. I feel like it's beautiful on a sentence, like on a language basis. And this is a William Stoner, born at the end of the 19th century into a dirt poor Missouri farming family. So we have that like Midwest.
Oh, yeah.
He never leaves Missouri, I don't think, but he separates himself from that farming family, goes into literature. There's sounds like, disappointments in his life. And so it seems like a similar character arc from Gatsby, but a different situation. And so that was like an accidental read alike that I just started.
Oh, I'm jealous. I have Stoner. I've been told I will like it, and now knowing that you're liking it, I know I will like it.
Oh.
So, ooh, that's exciting. Interesting comparison too.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. And you also mentioned Great Expectations as
Yes.
like sort of a read alike.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
lot of like Pip. I feel like Nick reminded me of Pip a lot of times, but also Gatsby reminded me of Pip. I like and then the whole plot relying on coincidences. So Great Expectations is a good comparison in that way.
yeah. I think the read alike that I had, which isn't necessarily a one per one in terms of time or place, but just the idea of the story reminded me of this was The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro.
Mm.
And I know you said that's one that you haven't read. And I mean, different time, different place, as in it's taking place in the English countryside during, or no, after, I believe. Well, during and just after World War II. But you have that element that you were mentioning in terms of you have some upstairs, downstairs going. You have sort of lifestyle of the really wealthy, as well as the downsides of it and negative impacts. But there was something about the feel of the perspective of the books that felt somewhat similar to me, but I felt like Remains the Day did everything I wanted The Great Gatsby to do. So that was my read alike. And then if I did like another book that I feel like I would want instead of this one, you actually mentioned it earlier, which is Ragtime.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that does a lot of things. It has an interesting storyline that's much more compelling, even though it's really weird and all over the place and veers off towards the end. At
Yeah,
least
we
it veers
talked
off.
about that one almost being like a book sandwiched within a separate book.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it takes place similar time period. You get some mention of like the jazz age happening, even though you don't necessarily get into the roaring 20s side of it. But I feel like you get a much larger scope of what
Mhm.
was going on. You do have a bit of the upper class mentioned because you start to get into JP Morgan and that kind of thing. You get different classes, different races, all kind of mixed within the book. And I just feel like if you're going to study that time period, like you're getting a much broader perspective still within New York City.
Mhm.
Um, so to me, that feels like a better like mix if you're going to just go with the we need to read this because we need to study this time period. I think if you're going to do the we need to read it because we need to read a classic, a lot of people consider Ragtime a classic, but I think Passing is another good option, or really anything from the Harlem Renaissance that's going on at the same time. Yeah, and again, even that, all of that is still very New York City centered. So that's something that I think is interesting to consider as
Mhm.
well. So, but those would be my recommendations or thoughts or other things that I would follow up on if I wanted to read more during this time period, but maybe get a different perspective on things. And then final couple of comments we have here. Diana has read nearly all of Fitzgerald's works and especially liked The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
I don't think I realized that was Fitzgerald. I've never read it, and I don't think I've seen the movie, but I've been very intrigued.
Yeah, I have been too. And it also feels very different
Yeah.
from a lot of the other books that I associate with him. So, and it's a short story or novella. I have it in like a collection of his
I
short
also picked up a collection of his short stories, knowing that I don't like Gatsby, but I was like, maybe something else. So that's good to know.
Yeah. Um, Doug is in a different place. He has read a few other Fitzgeralds, but liked Gatsby the best. So I can't really tell from all of your comments, Doug. Do you like The Great Gatsby, or is it just you like The Gatsby the best of all of his works, but in terms of books in general, it's not your favorite? Like, I haven't been able to tell where you fall on Great Gatsby compared to other things. Diana thinks if he would have finished The Last Tycoon, it might have been his best. I haven't even heard of that one.
That does sound like it would be more intriguing to me.
I've never even heard of it.
The Last Tycoon.
Yeah. Things to know. Well, I think that's it. That's all I have on this one.
Yeah. I'm going to go do some homework, I think, and just see more reactions. I especially want to head over to Pat's channel as, BookTube's English teacher and see if she has a video on how she taught The Great Gatsby.
Yeah.
So she loves this book.
Yeah. It's always like helpful and fun to get a recent English teacher's perspective on that. And also like to hear like what reactions she got in class and how she talked about it. And I meant to contact Pat before we did this discussion to have a little bit more insight, because certainly reading it as adults, we're always aware that like how we were taught the book, we might not remember, and that how well this works in the classroom is going to vary from teacher to teacher, and what the purpose is for reading it in the class and how that is done. But reading it reading it outside of that sphere, unlike Nick, we can be judgy McJudgy pants and be honest about it.
And be honest about it. He was judging everybody.
Right. He was definitely judging everybody. He just wasn't being honest about it. So that is it for today. Our next book, The Odyssey?
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh.
That's a way to start off the year.
Well, we will be continuing.
We were very ambitious when we made the reading list, I think.
We are. If you guys have seen our high school required reading list, and then Alex is now going to be hosting my members book club with me. If you've seen that list, we don't hold back. Yeah. We're like,
I started last night. I started the audiobook for January's pick.
The Death of Ivan Illich.
Yeah, and even there was a point where I was like, oh, this is kind of Gatsby's arc too.
Oh, I could kind of see that based on the little bit I know of that book.
Yeah.
Interesting. But it's going to be fun.
Yes.
So now you guys know, if you haven't seen, our next book, I'm pretty sure, is The Odyssey. So we will be working away at that at some point. And I think how it might end up happening is, because the channel book club is every other month, it might work out for us to do our discussions for this on the months that we have off from that.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Generally, Alex and I are buddy reading something together.
Find us talking about some book or other.
Yep. And then we just sneak these videos and live streams in whenever we finish, and it works into our schedule. So, but so you guys can join us next time. Thank you for everybody who has joined us here live. Diana is saying thanks for the discussion and review. Really enjoy these moments. So do we.
Yes, we do.
And Doug's only met on the Gatsby. Okay, too bougie for you.
Same. Yeah.
Yep. And thanks for the great book club. You're welcome, Doug. And thank you all for joining. Yep. Thank you all for coming. And we look forward to discussing more books with you guys in the new year, which is crazy to say.
Yes. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope you all had a good holiday season so far and continue.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, read The Odyssey or The Death of Ivan Illich or something, and we'll talk to you all next time. Bye. Yeah.